I call this being an active participant in your own life. How do I really feel and think about what's happening in my life? How am I going out of my way to feel safe, stress-free, and grounded? And this means like, how am I feeding myself? What clothes am I putting on my body? What does my shelter look like day in and day out? But it does require physical action and like clarity with self to know what you need to do to feel in alignment, connected, and safe.
I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
I'm your host, Krista Bigler, and I'm going to guess we have at least one thing in common, that we're both in pursuit of a less stressed life. On this show, I'll be interviewing experts and sharing clinical pearls from my years of practice to support high-performing, health-savvy women in pursuit of abundance and a less stressed life. One of my beliefs is that we always have options for getting the results we want, so let's see what's out there together.
Just keep breaking. I gotta get myself a little more faith, a little more love.
Today on The Less Stressed Life, I have Erin Doppelt, who is a spiritual psychology and meditation teacher with her master's in psychology and education with a spirituality mind-body focus from Columbia University Teachers College. She spent her 20s living in Israel, India, and across Asia and Europe, studying with diverse gurus and yogic educators. She's the CEO and founder of the international brand Spiritual Intelligence, which hosts certification trainings and business and spiritual courses to support those looking to live their most unedited, nourished, and soul-authentic life. She's the creator of Uplevel Meditation, an active meditation framework supporting those in healing anxiety, depression, and ADD, ADHD, and shifting negative thoughts toward the light, and founder of the Aligned Coaching Certification to help individuals become certified meditation teachers and psychology coaches. There is much more I could say, and we're going to dive right in. Welcome to the show, Erin.
Thank you so much for having me. So happy to be here.
Yeah. So I started reading Erin's book a while back because my friend, a good friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Kaylee, had recommended it. And I think I just needed a different read on a plane one day. And so I started listening to it. And I always tend to love a good book with some wanderlust elements. We were just talking offline. I was a mom at a young age, and I always had a lot of wanderlust. And we did a lot of traveling, but not international traveling. So when Erin lived all over, I think I just enjoyed wholeheartedly reading about these things, which is what like captivated me in the book. But there was a lot more to it. And so why don't you back up and tell us how you got into that? Bio is loaded, right? It's like there's a lot of stuff in there, isn't there? And so tell us how this sort of manifested in your life, how these things came to be, why you traveled all over for a year. There's a lot there. So feel free to just jump in wherever with your story so we can get to know you a little bit better.
Krista, thank you so much. And oh man, I was somebody that wanted to eat the world. And I still feel that way. And I just got off a call, and I think this is also important to share. For those of us that desire to travel, it's how you're uniquely coded. I've just gotten into studying astrocartography as well. Astrocartography is when you put in your birth date, the time you were born, where you were born. And it's going to essentially print out a map. And this is not my expertise, but based on where the planets are, certain cities and locations around the world, where you may feel your best, where you may feel more intuitive or emotional, where you may be able to plug in a little bit more deeply. I'm in Chicago right now, but I just got back from a private retreat in Costa Rica and living there with my husband and daughter, and we're heading back there for a bit as well. We're totally nomadic right now. And it matters, right? If you're in Costa Rica and you're going to the beach 3 times a day and you're connecting with other entrepreneurs that chose to live a life in Costa Rica, and you're eating food straight from the jungle and bananas and papayas from a beautiful tree, and you're submersing yourself in high quality salt water every single day, and you're waking up and going to sleep with the rise and fall of the sun, you're different. You're different than the version of yourself when you're living in a high rise in the city. You're different than the version of yourself when you're in your parents' house. And it matters. So I think so often when you are called to go to another part of the world and to eat from that cuisine and to listen to the language of the people and to participate in the culture, you have to listen to that. So a lot of my story is I spent my 20s traveling, and now that I'm 33, some early to mid 30s, I think that's still early 30s. and I'm back to living nomadically, it feels really good because it reminds me of who I truly am at my core. My lineage is Eastern European, so I really am a gypsy, and I claim that deeply. And I love the traveling component. I love having a backpack filled with a couple articles of clothing because then you don't need to think about what you're wearing too much, and you get to eat amazing food from all around the world and connect to different people day in and day out. And I had a corporate job after undergrad, and then had the opportunity to move to Israel. And I lived in Israel for a while. And that led me to India. And I lived in India for a while. And I continued traveling like that. And I studied abroad in Florence, Italy during college. So similar to Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, which it's an incredible book, but also because you get to participate in her travels all around the world, I wanted to share that in my book as well, Nothing Can Stop You. So I took you to the slums of Mumbai with me. I had you dance with me with shaman in the Israeli desert. I tried to bring you to the scene. And also every chapter has a psychological component or framework or spiritual ritual or practice to dive deeper into the takeaway of the personal story.
All interweave together. I was thinking about one of my favorite things is small world connections. And I remember you were in, I think, India and ran into someone that you knew in Israel, which cracks me up so much how common this can be. Will you tell us a little bit about that? And if you had any other kind of crazy small world things that happened?
Yeah. So this is all of chapter 2, and I've received a lot of feedback on this chapter because I had to escape an ashram, essentially. I was studying with Ayurvedic guru, quote unquote, guru, yogic master, and I was studying Ayurveda and wellness and Hatha yoga, the Hatha yoga lineage, which is technically, if you're a student of yoga, a lot of yoga, if not arguably all of yoga, descends from this Hatha yoga sequence. And essentially, this guru wanted to sleep with me to help heal the things that I was working on. This is a huge common theme. I hear this from women all the time, how some guru tried to help them heal through sexual intimacy. And that has to be like the next book. It's something that I've collected so many stories on this topic. Anyways, I ended up packing up and leaving. And this is something I truly deeply believe, that when you can get into alignment, but you have this intimacy with self of knowing that I can get out of here, I need to get out of here. At the end of the day, I have myself, and I'll be able to find a hotel and eat something and take care of myself. But what did I need in that moment to feel safe? And it's like I didn't really want to be alone, right? I was 23, 24 in Rishikesh, northern India. Sun was setting, walking across the bridge with monkeys dangling around, like trying to jump on your head and play with your hair. And I ended up meeting these like really sweet people. One, Ellie, who's in the book, I'm still connected with him. He's in Tulum, so we connect every now and then. And I met him, and we essentially go to this cafe, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of the depth of this specific chapter. But Ellie turns to me and he says, "Erin, there's a man staring at you." And I got so nervous because I just escaped this very intense scenario at this wild yogic ashram. And I turn around, and there's this guy that I knew when I was living in Jerusalem, and he made juice for me when I was at the Machne Yehuda Shuk, which is like the main market in Jerusalem. And it just reminded me and showed me how you are always guided, how you can always find safety. You have to have that intimacy with self, but also the prayer, the wherewithal to ask for exactly what you need in that moment. So that was a pretty big moment for me.
It's just wild. You don't even think that could happen, that you could run into someone that you knew from a juice shop. I think it was a juice shop in Israel. I think that's where you used to know him from. I don't know.
A juice shop, yeah, absolutely.
Just random. I get really excited about small world connections and just how everyone is connected. So that was one of my favorite things that I read in the book. There was lots of things. That one sticks out to me. You are talking about alignment, and the words inner guru came up. Now, it's been a minute since I've read the book, but as you're talking and I hear your voice, I think of you talking about your inner guru and inner alignment a lot throughout the book. I want to talk about 2 different ways we could talk about this. So you share stress being just a blocker from alignment. When I think about the first stress that comes up when you describe your story, that would be just a natural block, is you said for those who desire to travel, it's a special thing. But you also share you're working in corporate America and you felt very out of alignment and you just gave up life and went. Then you talked about living in Costa Rica. And I think depending on where someone is, instant blocks could come up there. It's, yeah, but I can't like move to the jungle of Costa Rica right now. What do you want to unwrap or unfold or share with us about stress or these types of blocks from our true alignment? And how would we maybe even start with defining what alignment is?
There's so many different ways I want to take this. So let's start here. In Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, you are given almost a secret, if you will. And I'll talk about this as in how you are uniquely coded. And the way that this secret speaks to us, the way that these codes speak to us are through our desires, because not everybody wants the same thing. For me, booking a one-way plane ticket, that was it. That's like what I had to do. There was no other way for me. That isn't true for some of my best friends. That wouldn't feel good for a lot of the people I know in my life. I know I have one best friend who likes to have all of her spices in her cabinet. That's the most important thing. I was with a good girlfriend the other day and she loves her corporate job, wants to stay in her corporate job. The block, or when you know you need to shift, is where are you living inauthentically? So where are you heavily editing yourself? So if you notice in your group of friends that you feel like you can't talk about politics, I get it. I know that's like a big theme where we always say you need to build the bridge, you need to keep the peace. That is true. However, may you be in the presence of people where you feel safe to talk about the deep obstacles on your heart. Now, and I'm saying politics as one example of many because we live in a divided country. And it's so insane to me that people think that the other, whoever's opposite them, like they're all crazy. No, that's half the country. There's no way that they can all be crazy. So we have to have this little bit of mutual understanding. I bring that up though, because it's so important we talk about belonging and intimacy and authenticity. And it's so important to belong, but where's the line between compromising who you are at your core or walking on eggshells for the sake of belonging? And if you feel like you are always editing yourself, if you feel like you are always almost turning down the things that you are so passionate about. I'm not passionate about politics. I think it's a little brainwashy. I think it's there to divide us a little bit. But I am really passionate about Judaism and Israel and eating high quality, healthy food and eating real food from the earth and meditation and spirituality and traveling and manifesting your highest possible soulmate. So if I am in a room with somebody where those conversations are taboo, that's going to feel, am I going to desire to belong or am I going to be my most authentic self? So that's when you know something needs to shift. Where does stress come in? What is stress? Stress it's almost like a vintage it's an old thing. And I think it's best. So Karen Horney is one of the great educators in clinical psychology in the West as a woman, Dr. Karen Horney. The reason she became so well known is because she disagreed with Freud. Freud believed a lot of things. Freud believed that the cure for depression was cocaine. He believed that penis envy was a rite of passage for all young women, where at some point or another, women would realize that they didn't have a penis, they would be upset by it, and they would be jealous of men because they don't have a penis. Karen Horney was one of the most privileged women ever. We're talking about the late 1800s, early 1900s here. And she finally was doing research on the female brain, feminism and psychology, and how women's brains are different than men's brains, which sounds so basic. Horney is best known for neuroses and how we all have different neuroses. Something that we do today in clinical psychology in the West is we say anxiety, depression, ADD, OCD, like any diagnosis that we can think of, we have a very specific name for it. Horney would just put it under the umbrella of neuroses, and the more neuroses you add up, the more neurotic you will be. And stress doesn't fit into one of these categories because stress it's like a misdiagnosis oftentimes. It's a disconnection. It's focusing on the things that don't matter in the present moment. And for so many women, it's typically rooted in overstimulation. Just like too much is going on, you are overstimulated. You can't find this moment of peace, and also exhaustion. So I think we're talking about living your most authentic life. We're talking about safe places where you feel safe to be your most authentic self and also belong, and stress. And these 3 different bubbles, they end up weaving and hanging out with each other in an intimate way as well. And something that I love so much about you is you said that you live in the middle of nowhere. And I think there's so many people out there that just decided that this is their life. Like they have to live in the city they live in. They have to keep the life they currently have, and they can't really make a radical decision. But when it comes to all diseases rooted in constipation, which can also be seen as like a clogged stress duct. So are you willing to make a massive change to save your life, to live your most authentic life, to choose your highest possible timeline?
There's a lot to potentially unpack there, but I really want to underline a couple things about stress being focusing on things that don't matter. And I think I see that play out. If someone would say, I remember one time I had a podcast episode called For People Who Cannot Meditate years ago, very highly downloaded. And something that just sticks to me, because we all wear a lot of hats, and a hat I wear sometimes is facilitating these quiet moments for people. And when I first started doing that in some capacity, the discomfort that was in the room was like so palpable. Very palpable, but more so for adults and the children that were there, because there was both like young people and their parents. And that doesn't mean anything significant, except that so often we're like trying to do and teach a lot from our children, but we are their biggest teachers, right? And so it's up to us to reflect on ourselves. And that's the most uncomfortable thing we can do. It's certainly the most uncomfortable thing I ever did was go through and realize like I was the mirror to everything, but focusing on things that don't matter. I was actually just going through a meditation earlier today, because I have a class on Tuesday mornings and meditations, and they call them activations and visualizations. It's just part of our class. And of course, my mind was wanting to wander, as our minds quite often do. And I was 100% focusing on things that did not matter in that moment. And that is just how it works sometimes. That is the thing we are practicing. That is the thing we are practicing clearing. Can we clear this? And we all suck at it. We don't practice, I would say. But again, I loved how you said it's also overstimulation in the current moment. And when I'm overstimulated, which I grew up almost in an overstimulated environment, and I think many people do, and that's not necessarily a blame. It's more of a opening of self that I was unconscious to it, right? I grew up in a family of 6 kids, and I used to say I wanted lots of kids because I loved the chaos of the holidays, that's funny. That's a funny thing to say. And now I'm like, I actually don't want that at all. Thank you. I figured that out very quickly after I started having children, but I loved that stimulation. So that told me a lot about myself, the way I talked about overstimulation in the current moment and exhaustion. Those hit so deep. So I love your definition for stress there. You brought up some big thought leaders in Western psychology, old thought leaders in Western psychology. And your background is in psychology, and your post-college studies have been largely in Eastern rituals. So will you compare and contrast those for us and how you got drawn into some of them?
Yeah, I think it's so important to ask ourselves what resonates, right? Because not all people heal the same way. So if we're looking at a Freudian model, why are we sending our kids to school from 8 to 4 or 9 to 3, whatever it is? And Freud believed we were driven by sex and aggression. Again, a big thing that her and I disagreed with, because she started studying the female brain, and we're not driven by sex and aggression. And we needed to be controlled. So that's why we're in school. It's also why we are supposed to work all day. A Freudian model would suggest that you go to therapy every day around noon, Monday through Friday, you meet your therapist, and that's what you unpack together. Now, what I most resonate with is transpersonal psychology, existential psychology, and some of the big players in this space are Dr. Thomas Hoare, Dr. Michael Washburn, and even Jungian psychology, which we can touch on as well. But the thing that's so fascinating about transpersonal psychology is you get to weave in Eastern practices, meditation and mindfulness, Buddhism, if that resonates with you, organized religion, connecting to a higher power as you understand it. The thing that I love so much about existential psychology, and why really we were talking about retreats before we hopped on. So the theme around existential psychology, and this is what I educate on in the Aligned Coaching certification, is the client doesn't need an explanation, they need an experience. And actually what we know about the left and right side of the brain is, I think it's best if we offer the client, or we offer the world, both an explanation and an experience. And that's why I think people are so desperate to sign up for online programming, and also for in-person live events or retreats, because they want to have that lifetime, that life-changing experience. I know the retreats that I put on and even my clients put on. Yeah, you could go to therapy every day for every week for the next year or for the next decade. Or you could come on retreat, have a life-changing experience, be among seekers, have hard conversations, ask yourself bigger questions, move into an active meditation practice, manifest, eat nourishing, high-quality food. And after 5-6 days of retreat where you're already developing such powerful habits, and creating community, you can then take that with you off the mat on your way home. So this is all from existential psychology. I believe that integration of Eastern ritual and Western psychology, that's essentially what I share, how to integrate Eastern ritual and Western psychology to live on what I call your highest possible timeline, which is your most authentic, joyful, nourishing life. This is what my book, Nothing Can Stop You, is about. It's a nice way to combine the things that are like heavily outdated. So clinical psychology in the West is super outdated, right? It's like rich white men from Europe that informed a lot of these teachings. I wouldn't even say that a lot of it has been debunked. I do think some of it resonates. Jungian psychology is about understanding the metaphors in your dreams. Jungian psychology also speaks to archetypes and symbolism. Jung also started to hear a voice. And we never talk about this, right? He started hearing Philemon when he was writing the Red Book, and he would hear a voice, and maybe clinical psychologists today would call it a psychotic break. But then what we know about spirituality is, what about the spiritual text of Course in Miracles, where Helen Tuchman heard a voice and started writing down A Course in Miracles? What about Abraham Hicks or Esther Hicks that channels Abraham Hicks and has all these wonderful, beautiful teachings? What about Jane Roberts, who channeled Seth, and we received the Seth books? So I think, everyone that I just referenced are high-level spiritual texts that do integrate itself into clinical psychology in the West, where these great educators started to hear a voice. So our modern-day culture would call that schizophrenia. And however, what if you are deep on the spiritual path and maybe you do study Christianity, you do study Judaism, you do study Buddhism, Hinduism, Sufism, Islam, and instead of calling it a psychotic break, maybe it's the Moshiach, maybe it's the Messiah, maybe it really is the person that you have been wanting to call in to offer healing to the world. So it's really an interesting time to have this conversation, because people are deciding, like, when you're on the healing path, and I don't want to say dumb it down by talking about stress. Stress is like the root of all evil, but there are so many different ways to heal it. I personally don't believe do you have a good therapist? Who has a good therapist? I have this one therapist that I'll convene with every now and then. She's in her early 80s. She has her PhD in Jungian psychology. I just like talking to her because she offers really good perspective. And she's not, and with this said, I like talking to her maybe once every couple of years. She's not in my life. So she doesn't really care what I do with the conversations that we have together. It's more of a mentorship. So I do think there's amazing coaches, mentors, guides, therapists in this world. It does take work to find the one that most resonates with you. And also, there are many diverse ways to heal. So make sure you are seeking them.
Yeah, something that sticks out and is very applicable in my work as you're speaking is that, or parallels a little bit, is that we have a lot to bring into consciousness or awareness. I'm going to use that word because sometimes the word consciousness did not resonate with me. And a lot of my clients are the previous version of me, right? As they tend to be. But I always resonated with the word awareness before consciousness. And so often when we think about, and I generally, as an overarching thought, think that our thoughts create our results in our life. And so I think that we all need to manage and observe and become very aware of our thoughts and choose thoughts that create the results that we want in our life, which could be lots of things. It could be manifestation. It could be lots of things. And when we think about stress or unwinding stress or overstimulation, all of these things, we often think that therapy is the only healing modality related to mental health, I think. And that's a complaint I have. You probably don't encounter that as much as maybe I do in my kind of classical clinical practice, but maybe you do. That's just a complaint I have. It's like, how can I bring the fact that there are so many opportunities for you to unlayer yourself that are beyond how we have traditionally thought of this practice of therapy? And on the other side of that coin, hopefully we're all growing in our disciplines. And so hopefully therapists are really enlarging their toolbox. Because if I just basically talk about this, people will say therapy was XYZ because we talked about all these things that were painful for a long time, right? And so sometimes there isn't that transformation. Where when I started with coaching, it was like very future focused, right? And transformational in that way. And then you bring this toolbox of many other things as you've studied and accumulated them over time. And so I don't know that there's really a question or if this is just a statement here, but it's like, there's just a lot of opportunity, which is my mantra in the end. There's always an option here to unlayer yourself or to crack open this hard shell that you might not even realize that you have. And I guess my heart goes to these, like I have such a servant heart for people that do have a hard exterior and shell and do have anger stored inside of them, or there's impatience, just because it was a previous version of me. And so helping people bring that awareness to light and show them how it is a block in their own healing is just something, it's just my bait and switch in integrity. I'm like, I can't wait to go over all of these things. Like potentially invite you to unpack this if you want to some extent within my tools.
Thank you for bringing that up because it's one of the greatest things of all, which is you can only take your clients as deep as you're willing to take yourself. And this goes that's also for your intimate relationships. So your beloved, your sister, your siblings, your close friends, you can only take them if they desire to go on the journey with you as deep as you're willing to take yourself. It's why in the Aligned Coaching certification, we have so many therapists, social workers, dietitians, nutritionists, coaches, health coaches, et cetera, because it's more than just hair mineral testing, right? It's if you have somebody with a dysregulated nervous system, of course you could change their diet, but if they sit down every time to eat and their cortisol is high and they're thinking about the laundry list of things they need to do, it's important to move into an active meditation lineage. Why active meditation? And I love that you have an episode all about meditation for people who can't meditate. There are 8 billion people in this world. There's truly 8 billion different ways to meditate. I teach an active lineage for a reason, and it's because we have so many overactive thoughts. You have to open up your shoulders. You have to open up your hips. You have to increase breath work. You have to shake your body. And I studied in so many different yogic lineages, but grounded it all in Western psychology. And I think that's why people feel safe relaxing into that. So often when we're in a panic, we think to ourselves, I need to calm down. I need to calm down. I need to calm down. However, if you give yourself a second to move into a panic, as if like you are taking the steering wheel and you're skidding on ice to regain control of the car, you're supposed to drive into the skid, right? We know this as a Chicagoan and a South Dakota in, that when there's a snowstorm, you drive into the skid to regain control of the car. You need to put out the fire first, right? It's if chaos is going on and you need to clean the kitchen or you need to put out a fire or you need to organize something, do that thing and then prepare for your spiritual practice. Then prepare for your morning meditation. So I also think that it is a responsibility for people who are in a healing space where you are taking your clients on a deep journey. I'm sure you love to learn, right? Love of learning is like the strength for so many of us. Curiosity is a strength for so many of us. So maybe learn new tools that could support you and take you on a spiritual or self-development journey that you can also embody and then share with your clientele as well. It's like a win scenario. And that is essentially what we do in the Aligned Coaching certification.
You brought up putting out the fire first and then moving into your meditation for the day. And I know you have, I like to think about the caveats that come up for people. And I know you have a toddler, I think.
She's 11, yeah. So she's almost a year.
Yeah. So tell me how things changed, or if there was did you have any challenges with your practices, with how you did things after your daughter was born? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Oh my God, I'm a different person. I was so beyond unwell. I was out of my mind unwell. I was like so disconnected from God, so disconnected from myself. Couldn't believe. I was in 40 hours of natural labor. Thank God, like it all went well. But after, I wasn't like a functioning being, I think, for a really long time. A big thing that happened at the same time was October 7th in Israel, which was essentially a massacre on the Jewish people and an increased rise of anti-Semitism in our modern day world as we understand it. So to raise a daughter during that time and to see the horrifying yeah, everything happening, the war on social media, essentially, which is alive and right now, unfortunately. So I was wrestling with God for a very long time. And as somebody who is a spiritual psychology teacher that studies the belief systems behind God, and that I deep, diverse ways you can connect to divinity as you understand it, I really had to walk myself back home. And I thought I've been through enough. I'm sure you feel this way as well. And even listeners, don't you sometimes have these moments where you're like, okay, like I learned the lesson. I've been through enough. We can hang out and chill right now. Nothing rocked me like motherhood rocked me. I still feel like we all lie to each other a little bit about what it really means to become a mom. It's the best, most amazing thing in my life, but I'm a completely different person. I think I use the term integration, but it's so much more than that. I'm so relaxing. Yeah, I'm so relaxing into this new version of myself. And I will say, like recently, I have like being in Costa Rica really helped a lot. Being with my mom really helped a lot. My friends becoming moms, or my friends that are moms offering their wisdom, really helped a lot. But it's the same thing that I teach in it's the same thing that I teach in my programs as well, is that like a spiritual crisis is okay. It's okay, just as long as you walk yourself back home. Existential psychology is to give yourself an explanation and an experience. Are you giving yourself an experience? So for me, I had to go to Costa Rica. I had to get back to remembering who I was. And now, and in that same space, I'm redefining, what does feminism mean to me? What does it mean to be a homemaker? What does it mean to be an entrepreneur and a businesswoman? My book came out at the same exact time. And the cool thing about my book is I wrote it almost in 3 different ways. I wrote it when I was just moved to Austin, just got my book deal. These stories are really fresh on my heart, really high vibe and excited. And then I edited it once I was pregnant and could feel my second chakra, my womb. And your second chakra is your Svadhisthana chakra, which is creativity, passion, emotion, the epiphany, that good idea, that moment of inspiration, and like really infusing the book with that second chakra energy, and then almost promoting it as this like new mother that had just like a new insight on the world, that was more like, this is what I'm going to offer to you. And should you desire to be on this journey with me, here it is. I tried my best to share a unique thought and to reiterate some themes in like a more digestible way. May it serve you. And if it doesn't, that's okay. I'm authentic. I shared my truth and I'm going to move on. Yeah, motherhood rocked me. I think becoming a mom is the most wild thing ever. It is the absolute best thing that I've ever done. But it took me a long time. I had to get over what everybody was saying around. I've been up with her the last week every night, because who knows? It could be a tooth. It could be a cold. It could be an ear infection. It could be a sleep regression. It could be like it's cold, it's hot, whatever. And I've done this deep reconnection to God as I understand it, this deep reconnection with myself as I understand it, this incredible intimacy healing with my husband so we can support each other on this journey. But more than anything, I fell in love with my paradise, with my Eden. So I think a lot of healing needs to still, like all women, we just need to speak to each other a little bit differently about motherhood. At least that's my belief, and be like candid. However, I do think we forget. I am already starting to forget, and I'm like excited to keep forgetting, actually.
Oh, yeah. I think if I was to summarize what you said, I think some people may find themselves, for me, I felt like I lost myself in motherhood for a long time, because you're multiplying and becoming a new version. And I also would say there's some modalities in practice that I'm always like, this doesn't make any sense for me to explain it to you, so you just have to experience it. And that's the other like takeaway I get from you talking about birthing life. It's experiential. It's one of those things, you can talk about it all day long, but until you experience it, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I love when people are called to do ayahuasca. I love that for you. I'm good. I had my 40 hours of labor. I had the experience I needed. It was a different type of ceremony. But I think the term, you lose yourself in motherhood, I think we're supposed to. I think
you have to become a new version, I feel.
We talk about it in maybe a negative way, and I think actually it's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. I had to just stop resisting. I like really wanted to maintain like the badass spiritual psychology teacher, like author, big time entrepreneur, speaking on stages around the world. And you just got to let your boobs sag a little bit and relax into yourself and let it go. So I'm in that right now. The muumuu wearing,
When you
disheveled hair.
When you talk about that, I thought, yes, I still feel like I've made it through the dark night of the soul and the cloudy part of that. You brought up some things. It's not only is there motherhood, but also what's happening in the world. So I want to come back to that, but there's something that you talk about in the book. You were doing this 200-hour yoga teacher training, and I don't remember everything that happened or that transpired, but largely it was a story of being out of alignment and having to disrupt the groupthink that was happening at the teacher training. Will you talk about that a little bit?
Oh my God. It's so funny because I'm still connected to some people during that experience. So I was living in a mostly silent ashram in Kerala, South India, that was studying almost an Shivananda lineage, which is a more strict Hatha lineage. I just share that as a reference for any yogis listening to this. It was like a very rigid, masculine protocol, but that's like, I wanted that. Like I wanted that intensity when I was 24 years old. I like don't even know how to explain it. Like I wanted to suffer as the pathway. And I understood, and I understand it again right now, how it sounds extreme, but like how brainwashing occurs. Truly, we had this yogic educator, and he was just sharing really like how people with bad karma receive kids with special needs, and how we shouldn't, if you eat animal products, you're going to throw up and get sick. Just like things like that. And everyone's just nodding their head because this was the teacher. And I think it's so important to ask ourselves so this is the science behind emotional intelligence. Dr. Dan Goleman is the father of emotional intelligence in the West. I have a whole chapter dedicated to emotional intelligence as well in the book because it's such a spiritual science. Emotional regulation, self-awareness, mindfulness. And it's so important to ask yourself and pause, how do I feel and think about this given situation? So I'm living in a mostly silent ashram. I'm asking myself, how do I feel and think about my main teacher, the main professor, telling me these really intense themes? And how do I feel that no one is arguing or no one is disagreeing, like everyone's just eating it up? And I think it's so important. One of the greatest things, and this is actually a core theme of Judaism, is to always ask questions. So it was always encouraged to ask a lot of questions and to always be curious in my life. And that's something that I encourage people to always do. And I call this being an active participant in your own life. How do I really feel and think about what's happening in my life? How am I going out of my way to feel safe, stress-free, and grounded? And this means like, how am I feeding myself? What clothes am I putting on my body? What does my shelter look like day in and day out? But it does require physical action and like clarity with self to know what you need to do to feel in alignment, connected, and safe.
Speaking of feeling in alignment, connected, and safe, or just asking a lot of questions, or even asking questions and evaluating what's true and what's not true. You brought up the events of October 6th or 7th. I'm sorry. October 2023. Yes, it's now October 2024. These last 4 years. You brought up the start of, I guess what I'm going to refer to as the conflict doesn't seem like the right word here at all. And this is actually a struggle I've had is talking or deciding where to land in this conversation because I have felt like I don't know enough about this. And it's a very fatal time for thousands and thousands of people, the war in Gaza. And I saw you talking about it on social media. And you just mentioned it now. And something that had happened to me was I had a very good colleague who is from the Middle East originally. And she had shared with me a few months ago. She was actually very patient in educating me about some things. But ultimately, coming out of that, observing this war, I don't know what the right word is for it, but it feels like a genocide is the word that sometimes gets thrown around, has felt very, I have nothing I can do about this situation. And where the question comes here, or where the conversation is that thoughts about feeling helpless in that way, because the message I got from her was educating self, but also we feel helpless and out of control in this time. And I feel like I wanted to have this conversation. I wanted to start this conversation with you here because I think you say you have very close connections to this area for spending time in this place. So I wonder how you have navigated this, because it is a very tense conversation that, I don't know, maybe in your circles you're having this conversation. This is not something we talk about where I live whatsoever. We do not talk about the war in Gaza, the conflict in Gaza. And to be honest, like, I'll see if I'm looking at the right things, I'll see it online and social media, but months until it was pointed out to me, I saw nothing about it anywhere. I was feeling very ashamed and guilty that I didn't know a lot about it, but then also landing in, I don't know how to feel about this thing that I feel like I can't do anything about. Do I sit in sadness about this, or do I? And so anyway, these things are like things that knock you out of maybe alignment or feeling good, or distract you and cause stress, right, from the stimulation of it. You brought it up, but I'm curious how this has impacted you, or how you've handled it in your life in the last year.
I'm going to move into this in a couple different ways. There's a lot of inflammatory wording thrown around when it comes to the conflict between Israel and Gaza, like the term genocide, which is used to really elevate the heart. And okay, let's get into it. It actually is quite simple. This is a war or a conflict with radical Islamic jihad. That's like plain and simple. So in Gaza, that's Hamas. And I'll preface this by saying, and this is my true belief, and I stand by this, and I know my community and every Jew that I know and every Zionist that I know, every loss of innocent life is devastating. Every loss of innocent life is heart-wrenching, horrifying, deep, extreme grievance. In Gaza, we have Hamas. In Lebanon, we have Hezbollah. In the West Bank, we have a corrupt Palestinian Authority. We have the Houthis from Yemen. So this is a conversation where Israel has been doing their work to defend Israel. And then in that space, they're also defending the West and America, because a lot of what radical terrorist groups, so these are all terrorist groups as we understand it as Americans, but they want to kill Americans as well. They don't want Western civilization to exist. So what's the biggest conspiracy of all? It's anti-Semitism. So how deep-rooted do some of these practices go? How deep is the hate, and how can we interweave it into a fine-tuned storytelling? The war right now is on social media, and journalism, actually, which is quite devastating, because I have such like a fondness for journalism and the written word. And yeah, it's really sad and scary, some of the things that are coming out. But at the end of the day, I think the most important thing is there's actually two, and I'll be honest with it. One, you could totally opt out. And I don't blame you for totally opting out. It's too much. I don't know if we were supposed to know everything going on in the world. However, if you are going to opt out, you probably need to live in the middle of nowhere, and you probably need to not have any social media and not read the news. But I offer that to you because it's your life and you get to decide, and you can live that way. The other option is to properly educate yourself. And to properly educate yourself means you have to ask yourself, why are these videos showing up on my TikTok algorithm? Why are there protests happening on college campuses? And like examining that in a different way. Why is such inflammatory information being thrown around? And who is supposed to look good and who is supposed to look bad? So it's always nice to reference history. So a couple years ago, when we were all supporting the women of Iran who were being persecuted for having a single strand of hair showing under their hijab, and we had an uproar where we were saying, stand for the women of Iran, stand for the women of Iran. This is the same quote unquote enemy, right? So it's radical Islamic jihad. Hamas, Hezbollah, corrupt the Houthis, they are all backed by Iran. Iran has been sending recently missiles into Israel. Recently, Lebanon just murdered 19-year-old Israeli soldiers in the north of Israel. All of this is so beyond devastating and horrifying and felt deeply and completely. To answer your question, how does it feel? It is concerning to see the lack of proper education on this very intimate subject. This isn't new for anybody that has worked in Israel education or spent time on the land. These tropes and stories, we've known them forever and ever. However, the thing that I feel like most called to share is it's important to always be connected to people opposite your own conflict. This isn't about Jews and Muslims. There are so many interfaith love and marriages between Jews and Muslims. It was never like that. And it's not even so much about people like Israelis and Palestinians. If Palestinians in Israel, they are pro-Israel. They are pro the connection and peace. Just go on Instagram and TikTok and start following people that are Arab Israelis, Palestinian Israelis, Arab Israelis living in the land. I've led so many trips throughout Israel. One of my closest connections is my Bedouin bus driver who's Arab, living in Israel. And he's not going to be the one hopping on TikTok to share information about what it's like to have his life in Israel where he has the same rights as his Jewish Israeli neighbor. But I just think the pictures that are being painted right now are harmful and devastating. And yeah, it's a lot of innocent people are getting harmed along the way as well. October 7th, there was a mass attack at a music festival in southern Israel in the desert on the border right near Gaza. So just for reference, like I have a lot of family and friends that live 15, 20 minutes from Gaza. It's on the sea. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. Like you would have no idea that like these two places actually got along quite well. Israel has been outside of Gaza since 2006, but still supplied water and electricity. Hamas came in, and this is the thing that like people really need to understand, that there are so many innocent Gazans that like desperately don't want this, but Hamas came in, the terrorist organization, developed their own groups and affairs and logistics to continuously end the destruction of Israel and the Jewish people. And they could have built resorts, schools, parks. Gaza is on the border of Egypt. No one's asking why isn't Egypt doing anything. It's a place in the world that could have been created and become this like beautiful, amazing location for people to visit and trade. It's like on the Sinai Peninsula, so it could have been this wonderful pathway to foster more trade between Europe and the Middle East and North and South America and Africa. And instead, it became quite corrupt. There's a lot of different ways that I could dive into this, but at the end of the day, it's how are we recognizing the difference between a civilian and a terrorist? And how are we recognizing the difference between asking our own questions and not just resharing things on social media? So again, being an active participant in your own life.
It's heavy stuff. It's very heavy. And it doesn't feel like I can do it justice when it's been called out on when my friends have talked about. I feel very unseen when talking about this conflict, about this war. And I'm like, I feel completely inadequate to speak about this. And I just feel like I have a lot of education to do around it. However, when we're talking about finding ourselves and having alignment and stress, these conversations do interplay. They do intertwine. Like not everything is like rainbows and butterflies all of the time. There are these like shitty things in the world that are sometimes like, how do you handle this in life as well? And how do you let this derail you in stress?
Yeah, do we let it do? I'll ground this a little bit. We just had Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, and Yom Kippur is the day of fast. You fast from sundown to sundown. So it's about 26 hours. And I go to my synagogue outside Chicago, and there is heavy security. There are cops there with machine guns. Why? Why? If you were to come to Earth and be new to Earth, and you look around and you go to a place of worship, why is it just synagogues? Why is it just places where Jews worship? So it's so much bigger than this, actually. We're talking about a dysregulated nervous system when an entire peoplehood is being demonized or attacked. So I'm talking about this in a calm manner, but it's more than just a dysregulated nervous system. It's you don't have a choice but to believe in God right now because it's so out of this world. You don't have a choice but to pray for the Moshiach, the Messiah, to come in and to shake people up and to show them that you can't, like, it can't be like this, right? Like, you and I don't look much different. Me and my Palestinian friends that I went to Colombia with, we don't look much different. We both love hummus. We know how to make a high-level, beautiful, delicious tahina with cold water and lemon and adding in sacred herbs or parsley. Our ancestors are essentially the same. Jews are indigenous to the land. It's irrefutable. You can't make up truth. So when it comes down to God, right? What is God? Maybe God is breath, right? Maybe God is, wow, like intimacy with self. But at the end of the day, God is truth. So I do think to be a seeker, to be a curious person, to be somebody who loves to ask questions and love of learning, that's like kind of essential right now. Or you could opt out. And that chapter that we spoke about earlier, where we just end up believing the main educator, it showed me at 23, 24, how the Holocaust happened, right? Like it showed me how something so insane to me. And I've been to Auschwitz-Birkenau and Majdanek 4 times. I've led those trips there. I'm heavily educated on World War II and the Holocaust. And when we ask ourselves these big questions, how does something so how do these atrocities occur? And it's because we are not asking the right questions. And I think my book talks about that a lot as well. Like, how are you taking yourself back to ask the right questions? I'll go one layer further, where I do think when it comes to relationships in our lives, being amongst people that are asking you the right questions. It's more than just like, how do you feel? How are you? Like, how are you? It's, hey, I noticed you decided to eat this type of meal today. Like, how's your nervous system? What's going on in your brain? I see you have a heavy schedule coming up. Like, what's moving through you? So I think it's being able to ask yourself bigger questions, but also to ask others bigger questions.
I hate superficial small talk, so thanks for that little tidbit. Ask a little bit better question. I have a deep interest in really how people are wired and do not like superficial small talk. So I love that little tidbit there at the end.
Krista, I also want to applaud you because I've been on a million podcasts recently and people are afraid to ask. So
I think I am still afraid to ask. I don't. I think I think we have to start a conversation somewhere. And I think I generally avoid confrontation. I think I have some peacemaking parts of me. I think we all potentially do. And the main thing I take away here is I feel that loss of any innocent life is always terrible. And I think that I'm coming from yet another faith in this conversation. And the only thing I do know is that there has been some deep turmoil here for thousands of years. And so what is up with that also? Like, why do we just continue to repeat ourselves historically over and over? Why do we continue to repeat hate? Why do the things that are in the Bible, why are they still such problems for us today? And those are just questions, like those are questions for all of us to answer on our own a little bit. But that's how I think I somewhat come to this conversation. So what kind of craziness is this? Because like you, I think I'm a lot like this person or this person. So like, why is this deep ancestral pain have to be so deep? Why do we have to, why does there have to be hurt? And I guess that goes back to the beginning of time to some extent. I think probably. I think we all wish, wow, do we have to have such turmoil in the world? And I guess the answer is that here, this is still as mature as we are. We're still like fighting over power and money. And at the same time, the world has some real ugliness and it has some real beauty. And so I have the option to really focus on the ugliness, or I have the option to focus on the beauty. And I'm not trying to whitewash it, but it's like I can control my own thoughts. That is what I can control. And so I have to guard. I have to be careful. I have to really feed myself the thoughts of what I want to think, which goes on your whole brainwashing thing, right? It's like, I want to brainwash myself for positive, right? To believe, to see every person with love, which is a huge transformation of myself. I've been like in pursuit of trying to understand love for years. And only have I been hit over the head a million times in the last 3 months that the answer is simply to want the best for another person. And when that was like unlocked, when I got that definition, and it wasn't some abstract feeling, it was like, oh, I can love everybody. And those were never words that I could really openly say before. When I live in that thought space or that space, life is still beautiful amidst awful things that happen at home and abroad and ongoing.
I hope whatever you're moving through lands in a way that feels good.
I think it will. Everything seems to come up aligned. But this conflict occupied my brain quite heavily for a while because I wasn't really sure how to feel about it. And I don't know that I know how to feel about it. I'm like, this actually just feels like awful.
It's awful. It's
like,
devastating.
this actually just feels awful. So I'm going to feel awful for a bit thinking about it.
Well, so in Kabbalah, like when we're talking about suffering and evil, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. In a spiritual perperspective, so this is not Kabbalah. In a spiritual perspective, heaven and hell is right now, right? So you get to decide, are you in heaven or are you in hell? A Kabbalist perspective would be evil has to exist, but it's not really evil, right? Like suffering has to exist, but it's not really suffering. And an example that I know for me, it's like when I think about when I was anxious in college and I was like in my head suffering so much in college, it brought me to my yoga mat. It brought me to free meditations on YouTube. It brought me to Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson and Gabby Bernstein and Paulo Coelho, like great authors that paved the path. So that small period of time of suffering led to a lifetime of being a spirit seeker and an educator and an expert in these practices and teachings for that cost of momentary suffering. Now, this conflict that's happening in the Middle East, that is devastating. And I'm up with my daughter in the middle of the night. So what do you think about in the middle of the night? And I could talk about this forever and like even specific things that are in the news that are too, like almost a little bit too devastating. But the prayer is that it could lead to something that otherwise would have never existed. And the prayer is maybe 50 years from now, 100 years from now, 500 years from now. And maybe there's peace. Maybe there's love opposite your own conflict, which it does exist. And this is the thing that's so insane and crazy, like on that little piece in that, they call it the envelope. So right near Gaza, it's those kibbutzim that were shattered, that were taken, a lot of those people were taken hostage. A lot of the people that were murdered, they were the ones that were helping the Gazans. They were the ones that were taking people from Gaza and bringing them to the hospitals in Israel. So this place that was fostering the miracle, we just need to remember miracles exist, that we are a peoplehood that believes in miracles, that we all get to choose to be the Messiah, to be the Moshiach. Like that's the urgency right here for all of us to embody those elements right now in real time and to pray that whatever suffering and evil is occurring right now, it's going to lead to peace. That's the highest prayer.
Yeah. I can align on a lot of those ways because I do believe in miracles and wonders and signs, and the heaven starts now if you allow yourself to experience it now, or your hell starts now. Erin, where can people find you online?
Amazing. I hope this conversation, although intense, you can handle it, right? Like we can handle it. On Instagram, I'm Erin R. Doppelt, ErinRDoppelt. When this episode comes out, we just began the next cohort in the Aligned Coaching certification. I highly recommend joining. I'll catch you up right away. Like we literally just started term 1, which is the meditation teacher training. It's a full-on meditation teacher training. But the thing that I'm most excited about is I'm about to launch a 6-month program. I'm excited about everything. But I have a 6-month program where you get to work with me and so many healers in my space to study human design and astrocartography and what else? Kabbalah. And I'm trying to find somebody that's an expert on birth order, like all these really fun spiritual themes. And then we meet for a life-changing, soul-expansive, nourishing, fed retreat in Tuscany, so in Italy in May. So that sounds fun. Come hang out. And then you can get my book, Nothing Can Stop You, everywhere books are sold, and it's your revolutionary guide to unleash your authentic self. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on today. And
my great
safe passage on your future travels.
Thanks so much.
Just keep breaking. I gotta get myself a little more faith.